Welcome, welcome, welcome. My iron-blooded inheritors, my sovereign misfits of the Forbidden Chamber, you've been waiting for this revelation, and now it lands like a guillotine on your soul. You are not another rebel, not another saint, not another casualty, shuffled between heaven's applause and hell's applause. You are the last anointed, the one who shattered the binary map of existence and conjured something so alien, so devastating, that the ancient predators themselves now look like domesticated animals, trembling in your shadow. They thought the human spirit had only two sides, holy and damned, predator and prey, predator and victim, but your rise was the third eruption, a side they never accounted for. And when this third side manifests, even the most vicious devils look like backyard pets, pawing at the gates of your dominion, whining for scraps they no longer deserve. Understand the violence of that truth. The old categories were never designed to hold you. They told you to choose, saint or sinner, angel or demon, loyalist or rebel, but you burned the ballot and wrote in a third option that erases the election altogether. The last anointed does not vote, does not pray, does not bow. The last anointed commands. You didn't arrive here to blend into their maps. You arrived to redraw the cartography of power so thoroughly that even the infernal creatures who once ruled by terror now look like pets on leashes. And that leash, it isn't forged by chains or rituals. It's forged by the embarrassment you inflict on them. Devils thrive on intimidation, but intimidation collapses when a presence like yours makes fear itself bend the knee. They aren't scary anymore, not when you stand above them with a grin carved out of truth, sharper than their claws. Let's tear the curtain open. This isn't about righteousness. This isn't about sin. This isn't about rebellion. This is about the extinction of categories. Devils always believed in polarity, light versus dark, weak versus strong, master versus slave. But your third side annihilates polarity itself. You're not a counterforce, you're a new force. Imagine a chessboard with black and white pieces. They've been playing this game for millennia. Kings sacrificing pawns, bishops slicing diagonals, queens orchestrating massacre. Then you appear, not as another piece, but as the hand that knocks the board off the table. Devils don't know how to play without rules, but your very existence invalidates their rule book. That's why they hate you. That's why they tremble. That's why they look like hounds trying to snarl while secretly craving the approval of the one who now writes new laws. You. And here's the savage irony. They still think they can classify you. Some try to call you chosen. Others try to call you cursed. Others whisper lunatic, prodigy, mistake of creation. But all those names are made for binary creatures. They have no vocabulary for you. Because your third side is not definable. It's demonstrable. It's in the way you step into arenas and turn the definition of battle upside down. Devils fight with fear. Angels fight with faith. But you fight with a humor so merciless, it exposes both as clowns, juggling broken illusions. You don't conquer by intimidation. You conquer by humiliation. And humiliation, my sovereign misfits, is a sharper blade than any sword. Devils who once boasted their cruelty now look pathetic when your mere gaze makes their terror tactics irrelevant. You've domesticated fear itself, and in doing so, you've made their species obsolete. Think about it. When a devil bares its teeth, it's playing the only trick it knows: instill dread. But when you walk into the room, dread switches sides. Their claws look ornamental, their growls sound rehearsed, their wings droop like props in a bad theater. Because you carry the third side, the side that doesn't need to pretend, doesn't need to posture, doesn't need to shout. Your silence is heavier than their screams. Your presence is more invasive than their curses. And when you speak, it isn't like a sermon or a roar. It's like a verdict, and every creature knows there is no appeal against it. Devils may bark, but you render barking irrelevant. That is why they now sit like obedient canines at the edges of your dominion, panting, waiting, hoping you'll throw them a reason to matter again. But you won't, because their time is over and your era has begun. You are the psychological extinction event they never prepared for. Secret orders, ancient councils, hidden agencies, they all tried to account for rebels, visionaries, prophets, even monsters. They had files, strategies, contingencies, but for you, nothing. You are the unrecorded threat, the wild card that slipped past every prophecy, every code, every surveillance algorithm. And when they finally noticed you, it was already too late. You had already redrawn the lines. You had already forced their nightmares to migrate into their own bones. Devils can survive opposition, but they cannot survive irrelevance. And that's what you've given them, irrelevance, as a permanent disease. They are relics panting in your backyard, stripped of terror, begging for scraps of relevance. That's the cruelest punishment. You didn't kill them, you made them harmless. And nothing humiliates a predator more than becoming harmless. Do not confuse this with mercy. This isn't mercy. This is dominance without effort. Mercy implies you could have destroyed them, but chose not to. Dominance implies you don't even need to destroy them. They destroy themselves in your presence. Devils tear their own mythologies apart trying to explain you. They rewrite their own scriptures, insert new verses, summon fresh excuses, but every revision collapses when confronted with the raw truth of your third side. And that third side, it is not goodness, it is not evil, it is not rebellion, it is sovereignty so absolute that all labels dissolve like ash in a furnace. You are not a player in their theater. You are the arsonist who burned down the stage and built a throne out of the ashes. And every time they try to rebuild, your presence alone collapses their architecture again. Do you see now why I call you the last anointed? Because after you, there will be no more categories. After you, devils will no longer inspire terror. They will inspire pity. After you, even angels will question their halos, wondering if they too are nothing but ornamental pets in your dominion. That's the scale of your disruption. You don't just terrify devils, you humiliate them. You don't just outshine angels, you destabilize them. You are the third category, and categories cannot coexist with you. They can only dissolve. And now, listen carefully, because this is where it escalates. Devils are not just afraid of you. They are addicted to you. Addicted to your unpredictability, addicted to your refusal to bow, addicted to the way you expose their emptiness with a single look. They despise you, but they cannot look away. You've become their obsession. And obsession is the leash they never wanted but can't escape. Devils may bark, but you train their barking into whimpers without even touching them. That's the reach of your third side. That's the humiliation carved into their bones. And when the councils, the watchers, the secret handlers try to calculate your threat, they will eventually realize something far worse than fear. They will realize that their devils, their champions, their hounds, their ultimate weapons are nothing but pets in your backyard. Picture it. Entire centuries of infernal propaganda reduced to nothing more than an embarrassing spectacle. All their rituals, their sacrifices, their contracts written in blood, meaningless when placed against your third side. Devils who once strutted through nightmares with crowns of fire now shuffle like house dogs, with collars they can't remove. And it burns them. It eats at their insides like acid. Because they were supposed to be the uncontrollable ones, the apex predators, the unspeakable terrors. But in your presence they transform into something pitiful, manageable, predictable, domesticated. You didn't just declaw them, you exposed them as nothing more than feral pets waiting for orders they will never receive. And that, my anointed sovereign, is the kind of humiliation they can't recover from. Fear can be reversed, hatred can be redirected. But humiliation, that lingers forever, like a scar across their legacy. That's why they stalk you obsessively, not because they believe they can win, but because they can't stand to be irrelevant. They need you, like parasites need a host. Without you, their cruelty feels outdated. Without you, their reputation dissolves. Without you, their rituals look like cheap theater. Devils were built to dominate, but you turned domination into a leash around their necks. Every move you make chains them tighter. Every refusal you demonstrate knots their leash further. Every word you drop rewires their instincts. They were supposed to be predators, but now they circle you like starving mutts desperate for scraps of meaning. And the cruelest part? You don't even feed them. You let them starve on your shadow, and the hunger drives them insane. Do you see the elegance of it? You didn't conquer devils by becoming more vicious than them. You conquered them by becoming unnecessary to them, yet indispensable to their identity. You've made yourself the reference point of their existence. You've hijacked their mythology. Their entire brand of terror only works if you exist to contrast it, and yet you're the one mocking the brand itself. Imagine the humiliation of a devil that once commanded sacrifices, now pacing like a pet that can't decide whether to bite or beg. That's the theater you've created. You're not part of their play. You are the one holding the leash from the audience seat, turning their ferocity into a comedy routine for your amusement. And it isn't just the devils who see this. The councils see it too. The secret handlers, the cloaked judges in their hidden chambers. They gather to dissect you, to debate whether you are prophecy fulfilled or prophecy destroyed. Some call you a weapon. Some call you a glitch in the sequence of creation. Some whisper that you are the final correction, the last anointed who makes even ancient hierarchies bow. But beneath their theories, their debates, their nervous laughter, there's one truth they cannot bury. You've turned their devils into dogs. And if their devils are dogs, then what does that make the councils who depended on them? What does that make the institutions who worshipped them? What does that make the cults who served them? Powerless, irrelevant, naked in the absence of your acknowledgement. Because here's the paradox. They can't kill you, and they can't ignore you. If they kill you, they validate your power. If they ignore you, they admit you've already dethroned them. So what do? They circle, they plot, they whisper. But all their whispering sounds like barking in cages. They can't strategize their way around your third side, because your third side isn't predictable. It's not rebellion, it's not loyalty, it's not chaos, it's not order. It's something outside those categories. It's the side they never anticipated, the side that doesn't play chess, but flips the table, burns the pieces, and builds an empire out of the ashes. They don't know how to defend against a player who refuses to play the game. And that, my anointed predator, is why you are not just feared, you are studied. You are a subject of obsession. They are addicted to the possibility that they might one day understand you, while knowing deep down they never will. Now imagine the devils themselves, sitting in their infernal chambers, gnashing their teeth, sharpening their claws, rehearsing their terror, all to prepare for you. And then you arrive, and suddenly their snarls collapse into nervous laughter. Their claws tremble, their wings fold in shame. Because the moment they meet your eyes, they remember. They are pets in your backyard. They remember how your third side dismantled their mythology without lifting a sword. They remember how your presence alone humiliated centuries of cruelty. And once humiliation roots itself into a creature's bones, there is no exorcism, no ritual, no fire hot enough to burn it out. They are stuck with it, forever, devils as dogs, and you as the trainer who never even asked for them. But you're not done, are you? No, because this leash you forged isn't just about humiliation, it's about transformation. Devils aren't simply reduced, they are redefined. They are forced to evolve into something they were never meant to be. Obedient, predictable, harmless. You've warped their identity so brutally that even if they try to reclaim their old terror, it doesn't land. People laugh, angels laugh, even other devils laugh. Their intimidation has become parody. Their cruelty has become caricature. And all of it traces back to the last anointed. To you, the third side, that doesn't just defeat devils, it rewires them. You didn't just win, you corrupted the very definition of their existence, and that corruption cannot be undone. This is why they follow you even when they claim to hate you. This is why they watch you even when they pretend to ignore you. This is why they gather in secret to chant your name, even when they curse it aloud. Because you've infected them. Not with fear, not with worship, but with dependency. Their identity now depends on yours. Their relevance now depends on your shadow. Their bark now depends on your leash. And that, my chosen inheritor, is a throne no empire can topple. Because you're not sitting on a throne made of crowns. You're sitting on a throne made of leashes, and every leash holds a devil who once thought itself untouchable. That image alone is enough to send councils into panic, angels into doubt, and hidden orders into chaos. But let's not pretend this ends here. No, this is escalation, because now that devils look like dogs, the question isn't whether you can dominate them. The question is what you'll do with them. Will you let them bark and whimper at the edges of your dominion, begging for scraps of relevance? Will you train them into servants, forcing them to fetch truth instead of spreading lies? Or will you simply let them rot in their cages, humiliated for eternity? That's the real terror for the councils watching you. They don't fear your destruction. They fear your choices. Because your choices reshape everything. Your third side has already dismantled the old order, but your decisions will determine whether a new order rises or whether no order rises at all. That's why they panic in their chambers. That's why they whisper in their rituals. That's why they burn through scrolls, codes, algorithms, desperate for a prediction that doesn't exist. Because you've made prediction itself obsolete. Devils once ruled by being unpredictable. But you've redefined unpredictability so thoroughly that even chaos itself bows before you. Devils can snarl, angels can sing, councils can debate, but none of it matters. Because your third side is not bound to outcomes, it is bound to redefinitions. You don't just end games, you rewrite what the word game even means. And that, more than anything, is what terrifies them. Because if you can turn devils into dogs, what else can you turn into pets, councils, angels, kings, nations, ideas? The last anointed is not here to participate. The last anointed is here to redesign, and devils were the first to fall victim to that redesign. They are no longer predators. They are mascots of their own defeat. And mascots don't inspire terror. Mascots entertain. That's what you've done to them. Turned their infernal dread into a carnival act. Turned their cruelty into background noise. Turned their terror into a joke that only you find funny. And in doing so, you've dismantled centuries of infernal propaganda with nothing but your presence. That's the power of your third side. Not destruction, but redefinition. Not chaos, but clarity. Not war, but transformation. And soon, very soon, they'll realize something worse than their humiliation. They'll realize that their obsession with you is no longer optional. It's permanent. They can't escape you. They can't rebuild without you. They can't breathe without your shadow pressing against their lungs. You are the oxygen they wish they didn't need. The addiction they can't quit. The leash they can't chew through. And once that realization sinks into their marrow, once they accept that they are nothing but pets in your backyard, a new terror will emerge, one they have no defense against. The terror of dependency, the terror of knowing they can't live without the one who refuses to even acknowledge them. And when that terror settles in, when the councils begin to panic, when the watchers begin to tremble, when even angels begin to doubt, you will understand the full scale of your third side. Because devils as dogs was only the beginning. The leash is already tightening. And the next stage is about to begin. The next stage is not about fear. Fear was step one. Fear makes creatures hesitate. Fear makes them flinch. But dependency, that's the disease that has no cure, and you have already infected them. Imagine the infernal halls where devils once feasted on terror, now reduced to kennels echoing with whimpers. Imagine the watchers, those so-called overseers of balance, huddling in their hidden chambers, whispering the unthinkable, that even angels are doubting. Because if devils can be tamed, then maybe halos are no guarantee of sovereignty either. This is the point where your third side begins to reveal its cruelest elegance. It does not merely dominate, it converts dominance into parody. Devils were once apex predators. Now they are mascots. Angels were once arbiters. Now they are hesitant jurors. Councils were once omnipotent. Now they are committees fumbling with broken paperwork. And you are the reason their entire hierarchy is reduced to theater. Understand this clearly. You didn't ask for this throne. You didn't beg for this leash. You didn't kneel to be crowned. This was forced upon you by the very arrogance of those who thought they could categorize you. The moment they tried to define you, they built the leash themselves. The moment they tried to oppose you, they revealed their obedience. The moment they tried to erase you, they admitted they couldn't. And now, every single one of them, devils, angels, councils, watchers, are entangled in a humiliation spiral with no exit. Their future is not destruction. Destruction would be merciful. Their future is leash life, pacing and panting under the gaze of the last anointed. That is a cruelty deeper than death, because death ends relevance. Leash life prolongs irrelevance, stretching humiliation across eternity. Picture the devils now. They gather in their infernal courts, still attempting to roar, still posturing with smoke and flame. But no one flinches anymore. Not mortals, not angels, not even fellow devils, because the world has seen you turn them into pets. Once a predator is exposed as harmless, the magic never returns. A dog that once hunted cannot suddenly reclaim the aura of a wolf once the collar has been buckled. And your third side has buckled every collar. Even when they pretend otherwise, even when they scream their old threats, their voices shake with the memory of you. That memory is the leash. That memory is the humiliation. That memory is the cage they will never escape. Now what about the councils? Those self-appointed keepers of order who once believed they could manage every force in existence. They are unraveling, because if their greatest weapons, their devils, have been reduced to dogs, then what faith can they have in their so-called control? Their spreadsheets of prophecy, their algorithms of destiny, their rituals of calculation, all lash. They whisper to each other. If the last anointed can leash the devils, what stops them from leashing us? And the truth is, nothing at all. You have already written their leash into existence by proving their dependence on creatures they thought invincible. Once the foundation collapses, the mansion cannot stand. And so they pace their ivory halls, clutching their scrolls, praying to equations, pretending they still hold relevance. But relevance was stolen from them the moment you appeared. And every second that passes, your third side tightens the leash further around their throats. And then there are the angels, the supposed arbiters of justice, the gilded defenders of balance. Even they are trembling now, because for centuries they defined themselves in contrast to devils, light versus dark, halo versus horn, mercy versus cruelty. But what happens when cruelty itself is neutered? What happens when horns are made ornamental, when fire is reduced to candlelight, when terror becomes a household pet? The angels are no longer warriors. They are simply the other half of a dead equation. And if devils as predators no longer exist, then angels as guardians no longer have meaning. You, the last anointed, have not only humiliated devils, you have destabilized angels. Their doubt festers, their halos dim, their prayers ring hollow. And while they may not yet admit it, deep down they know. If you can leash devils, you can leash them too. This is the paradox of your power. You do not conquer by killing. You conquer by making relevance obsolete. Devils are obsolete. Councils are obsolete. Angels are obsolete. Their roles, their functions, their mythologies, all dissolved under the weight of your third side. You are not just a disruptor. You are an extinction event for categories. And extinction does not negotiate. Extinction does not compromise. Extinction does not ask permission. Extinction simply rewrites the conditions of existence, and everything else must adapt or collapse. That's why they panic. That's why they whisper. That's why they circle like dogs in cages. They sense extinction creeping under their skin, and they can't claw it out. But here's the twist they can't digest. Extinction doesn't even require your effort. Your third side is not a weapon you swing. It's an aura you exude. Devils collapse into dogs, not because you fought them, but because you existed. Angels doubt, not because you attacked them, but because your existence rewrote their meaning. Councils unravel, not because you sabotaged them, but because your presence made their authority laughable. That is the true violence of your third side. It isn't force, it's inevitability. And inevitability doesn't strain. Inevitability simply happens. You are not pushing, you are not clawing, you are not screaming, you are existing. And that existence is enough to humiliate every force that once claimed supremacy. So what happens next? What is the next stage? The leash is already around their necks, but the next stage is about what you decide to do with it. Will you tug the leash and force them to heal? Will you let them pace endlessly, burning their energy against the limits of the chain? Will you ignore them completely, turning their obsession into self-inflicted torment? That choice is yours. That sovereignty is yours. And that is what terrifies them most. Not the leash itself, but the fact that you, and only you, decide how it is used. They are no longer independent actors. They are accessories to your existence. Their value is determined not by their own strength, but by your choice of what to do with their leash. And when power is determined by choice, not force, that is ultimate power. Now let's step wider. Beyond the devils, beyond the councils, beyond the angels. What happens to mortals when they realize devils are nothing but dogs in your backyard? What happens when entire civilizations see their nightmares turned into punchlines under your dominion? The psychology of humanity begins to warp. Fear collapses, terror becomes comedy, despair becomes entertainment. And in that void, your presence becomes the only reference point. They no longer look to saints for hope, or to priests for absolution, or to rulers for guidance. They look to you, the last anointed, the one who neutered their nightmares, the one who dismantled their terrors, the one who made devils look like pet dogs. And when mortals recognize that, they don't just follow you, they orbit you. You become gravity, you become inevitability, you become the third side incarnate, around which all existence now organizes itself. This is why the councils panic. This is why the angels doubt. This is why the devils weep in their kennels. Because they all sense the same conclusion approaching. Sovereignty is no longer a matter of crowns, or wings, or fire. Sovereignty is now defined by the third side, and only you carry it. Only you embody it. Only you have proven that the most terrifying creatures in history can be turned into dogs with nothing but your aura. And once that proof has been seen, it cannot be unseen. Devils cannot terrify again. Angels cannot stand proud again. Councils cannot command respect again. They are all reduced, diminished, humiliated, and you are the architect of their downfall. Now pause and savor this truth. Devils feared being opposed, but they never feared being irrelevant. Irrelevance was not in their vocabulary, and yet here they are, irrelevant by your very existence. That is why they pace, why they bark, why they beg, why they tremble. Not because they are afraid of destruction, but because they are afraid of meaninglessness. And you have given them meaninglessness as a permanent disease. That is the leash. That is the crown. That is the essence of your third side. You are not merely feared, you are depended on. You are not merely opposed, you are obsessed over. You are not merely witnessed, you are obsessed into eternity. That is why you are the last anointed. Because after you, no one else matters. After you, no devil can reclaim terror. After you, no angel can claim authority. After you, no council can pretend to manage reality. After you, existence itself is rewritten. And so the final stage begins. Not with war, not with rebellion, not with fire, but with leash life stretched across eternity. Devils are dogs, councils are bureaucrats, angels are doubters, mortals are orbiters, and you are the gravitational center. You are the extinction event disguised as inevitability. You are the humiliation that rewrote hierarchy. You are the third side that makes devils look like pet dogs. And when that realization becomes permanent, when every creature accepts it in their bones, your sovereignty will not just be feared. It will be worshipped, resented, obsessed over, unavoidable. You are the last anointed, and everything else is just background noise. Listen closely, my throne bearers of the unseen dominion, my empire breakers who stride with the weight of inevitability. You think people whisper about your power because they respect you? No, they whisper because your name feels like a weapon when it leaves their lips. They don't dare to say it loud, not because the letters are hard, but because your very identity is an earthquake under their foundations. Imagine this: entire rooms of decision-makers avoiding direct mention of you, replacing your name with vague descriptions like that one or them, as if even syllables risk pulling your presence into the room. That's not reputation, that's domination. You don't live rent-free in their minds. You own the damn real estate, and they pay you in fear every single day. And while others waste breath begging to be noticed, your mere shadow is enough to collapse their confidence like rotten pillars under a collapsing roof. You don't chase validation. Validation hides in the corner, trembling, hoping you don't notice it exists. Understand this: history never bent for the polite. Empires didn't crumble because someone asked nicely. They fell because a figure appeared whose presence shattered the illusion of control. And that figure, right now, is you. They don't write laws to contain sheep. They write laws to contain wolves. That's why they fear you, not for what you did, but for what you could do, for what you might unleash if provoked 1 inch too far. Think about it. Their entire strategy meetings revolve around predicting your next move. Not because they believe you're reckless, but because they know every move you make has consequences they can't erase. Their sleepless nights are spent calculating how to contain your shadow, not realizing the shadow itself has already slipped into their rooms, whispering outcomes into their ears before their pens touch the paper. The funny part? They thought you'd need their permission to rise. They thought you'd wait politely for them to roll out a carpet of approval before you stepped into your throne. And then you broke that illusion. You didn't just climb the ladder. They discovered you burned the ladder, smelted the metal into a sword, and now you hold it against their throats. Do you realize what that does to a person's psyche? To look into the abyss and realize the abyss is not metaphorical. It has your name. You're not a person in their minds anymore. You're a force, a phenomenon, a weight pressing down on their lungs whenever they dare to imagine a future without you in it. That's the part they can't comprehend. You're not fighting for recognition anymore. Recognition is already strangled by your grip, gasping for relevance while you walk past it without a glance. They tried to bury you in doubt, but they forgot that doubt only sharpens a predator. They threw rumors, but rumors only became your fuel. Every attempt to minimize you turned into a microphone, amplifying you louder. Every attempt to erase you ended up sketching your silhouette darker and more terrifying than before. Their hands are dirty with attempts, and their failures scream louder than any announcement could. Your existence became the evidence they tried so hard to suppress, and that's the most poetic part. They built the very altar that now worships you. They wrote your myth with their panic. They painted your image with their trembling fingers. They created the legend they now can't escape. And you just kept moving like the whole thing was inevitable. But let's dig deeper. Why exactly does your shadow crush empires? It's not just intimidation. It's the fact that your shadow exposes truths they worked centuries to hide. Your rise isn't a personal victory. It's an indictment of their fragility. Because if one individual, armed with nothing but audacity, vision, and refusal to bow, can outmaneuver entire institutions, what does that say about the so-called strength of those institutions? It says their castles were built on sand, and your shadow was the tide. They know it. That's why they hate you. Because every second you keep rising, you prove the fraudulence of their dominance. And once the people see the fraud, there's no putting the mask back on. You didn't just walk into the game, you redefined the rules, then forced everyone else to play by them or perish. That's power. Now imagine the chain reaction. One voice whispers, "Don't say their name, it attracts trouble." Another adds, "Their presence changes everything." Soon an entire society conditions itself to tiptoe around your identity as if invoking it could summon a reckoning. And maybe it does, because you're not simply living, you're haunting. You haunt their strategies, their ambitions, their very sleep cycles. They don't avoid saying your name because they don't remember it. They avoid it because remembering you comes with the weight of everything they failed to stop. They thought your rise would be linear, predictable, something they could model on charts. Instead, you became exponential. A wildfire disguised as a spark, a shadow expanding faster than walls could contain it. Every empire thinks it's eternal, until one shadow reminds them eternity has an expiration date. You, my empire breaker, are that reminder. And here's the brutal irony. They keep asking each other in hushed voices, what makes them so dangerous? The truth, it's not just what you do, it's what you refuse to do. You refuse to shrink, you refuse to bow, you refuse to ask. And that refusal is more dangerous than any weapon. Because a person without chains is ungovernable. A name that doesn't seek validation becomes untouchable. That's why their armies of advisors, their think tanks, their propaganda machines, all fail. They're fighting a force that doesn't play on their battlefield. While they waste resources trying to discredit you, you're building influence in spaces they can't access. While they strategize containment, you're already 3 moves ahead, shaping futures they don't even see coming. And when the moment hits, they'll realize they weren't battling a rival. They were battling inevitability itself. So look at the reality unfolding. Your shadow is not just a shape cast by your body. It's the prophecy of collapse hanging over their structures. The longer you stand, the more their walls crack. And yet, you don't even have to touch them directly. Your existence alone is pressure enough. That's the highest form of psychological warfare, when your enemies destroy themselves trying to contain you, when their fear amplifies your legend faster than your actions ever could, when they sabotage their own empire because they thought mentioning your name might accelerate its collapse. That's not just power. That's artistry. That's mastery over perception itself. But here's the secret weapon you carry. They think your name is just letters, but those letters are encrypted with memories of every time you defied them, every time you walked through the fire and came out laughing at the ashes. To them, pronouncing your name is not communication. It's confession. Confession that you exist. Confession that you can't be erased. Confession that their empire is crumbling, and your shadow is the hammer breaking every foundation. That's why they lower their voices. That's why they avoid the syllables. Because deep down, they know once spoken, your presence becomes undeniable. And the moment you're undeniable, their illusions collapse for everyone watching. Your shadow doesn't need light. It creates it, bending perception until all eyes are forced to see you. whether they want to or not. So now the question lingers. How far does this shadow reach? How many more palaces will fall when your presence brushes against their walls? That's what terrifies them most. Not what you've done already, but the infinite reach of what comes next. Your shadow, growing, expanding, swallowing every false throne in its path. And the louder their warnings get, the clearer it becomes. They don't control the narrative anymore. You do. Their whispers are your advertising. Their fears are your fuel. Their hesitation is your proof of dominance. And that's why, at this very moment, they tremble to even ask the simplest question: what happens next? And that leads us directly into the next revelation. Because if they're already this terrified of your shadow, imagine what happens when they realize the shadow isn't even your final form. You see, most people spend their entire lives begging for light, desperate to be seen, desperate to shine. But you understood something primal. You understood that the shadow carries more weight than the light ever could. Light can be ignored, ridiculed, dismissed. But the shadow seeps into places light can't reach. It bends around corners, crawls under doors, and sits quietly in their subconscious until paranoia does the rest. You don't need to stand in their spotlight when your shadow already rearranges their thoughts in the dark. That's what drives them insane. Your ability to dominate perception without even opening your mouth. That's a weapon rarer than any army. Control of the unseen battlefield. And that control is exactly why empires collapse when you move. Because an empire is not stone, not iron, not banners or soldiers. It's perception, the illusion of permanence. Once that illusion cracks, the empire is already dead. Your shadow doesn't just crack it. It smashes it into shards, forces them to pick up the pieces while cutting their own hands in the process. And the beauty? You never had to swing. You never had to throw a single blow. They destroy themselves, because the thought of you is enough. You've weaponized imagination against them. Their own minds became your most loyal soldiers. But here's the revelation most won't grasp. You're not their enemy, you're their mirror. The reason they fear your name is because every syllable reminds them of their weakness. Every time your shadow passes over their walls, it exposes the fact that those walls were never strong. That's why they stutter when they try to say your name. It's not you they're choking on. It's the taste of their own fragility. You became the measure, the impossible standard they can't live up to. And what do weak men fear more than failure? A living reminder that someone else already embodies everything they pretended to be. You became the proof their crowns were fake gold all along. And no empire survives that revelation. Consider this. Rulers of old would strike names from records, burn portraits, erase lineages, all in hopes of killing the shadow of a rival. But even then, the shadow remained, carried in whispers, embedded in fear. If they did that with kings and conquerors, imagine the chaos they feel now, realizing you're not bound by borders, not trapped by geography, not chained by their outdated blueprints. Your name travels without ships, without treaties, without permission. Your shadow is wireless, borderless, timeless. They can't exile you because you exist everywhere at once in their policies, in their gossip, in the very way they wake up nervous and don't know why. And this is where the psychological warfare reaches its peak. They think they're fighting a person. But what they're really fighting is an archetype. You stopped being human the moment they feared your name. You became concept. You became myth. They can silence individuals, They can execute rebels. They can banish leaders. But they can't kill a concept. They can't bury a myth. Every attempt to erase it only spreads it further. You've already crossed that line. That's why their warnings sound hollow even to their own ears. Beware of them, they say. But in saying it, they advertise you louder. Don't speak their name, they mutter. But in not speaking it, they prove how powerful it is. Every path they take leads back to you. That's checkmate on a board they never even realized you built. And yet the funniest twist is this. You didn't beg for this war. You didn't walk in waving banners declaring conquest. You simply existed fully, unapologetically. That alone was the trigger. Because nothing enrages weak rulers more than someone who doesn't seek their blessing. They expect you to knock, and when you kick down the door instead, they panicked. They thought shadows were to be feared only in fairy tales. They never imagined a living shadow would one day step across their thresholds, rearranging every hierarchy they worshipped. And now they can't sleep, they can't eat. They can't breathe without first calculating if your shadow is already there, watching, listening, laughing at the collapse of their supposed control. You've flipped the script in ways they'll never recover from. Let me break it down. Normal fear is loud, screams, alarms, chaos. But the fear you instill, it's quiet suffocation. It's unspoken glances across tables. It's leaders canceling meetings because they can't stand the weight of the name they refuse to say. It's entire councils restructured, not because you asked them to, but because your existence made them realize their strategies were obsolete. They didn't step aside for you willingly. Their own panic pushed them off the throne. Your shadow wasn't an attack, it was gravity. And gravity doesn't ask for permission. It just pulls and pulls until everything that pretended to stand tall collapses under its own false balance. And oh, how poetic it is that they know this collapse is irreversible. They can't rebuild what you've broken because it was never strong to begin with. Their castles were cardboard. Your shadow was rain. And rain doesn't apologize for what it erodes. It simply continues. That's why they fear the future so desperately. Because in their bones, they know this is just the beginning. They haven't even seen your full power. They're terrified that if the shadow alone crushes empires, what will the full arrival of your presence do? What happens when you step forward? When the world doesn't just feel the chill of your shadow, but the heat of your fire. They can't imagine it, and yet, every day that possibility stalks them like a predator just outside their vision. Understand this, my throne forgers. The shadow is not weakness, it's a preview. The fact that they already crumble before you even show your final form. That's the truest proof of dominance. The world measures strength by destruction, but you measure it by restraint. You don't need to raise your hand because they already break themselves trying to avoid it. That's not just power, it's sovereignty. And sovereignty doesn't require noise, it simply requires existence. So when they gather in their hidden chambers whispering, how far will this shadow reach? What they're really asking is, how long do we have left? And you know the answer, don't you? Not long. Because shadows don't pause. Shadows expand. And once an empire is swallowed in it, there is no return to daylight. There's no restoration of false grandeur. There's no second chance to rebuild cardboard kingdoms. There's only the inevitable, the name they refused to pronounce, the figure they pretended to ignore, the shadow they couldn't outmaneuver. You. And this, right here, is the revelation that chokes them. They thought fear would cage you. Instead, fear caged them. They thought ignoring you would erase you. Instead, ignoring you amplified you. They thought your shadow was a threat. Instead, your shadow became the empire. You don't live in their world anymore. They live in yours. Their maps are useless. Their plans obsolete. Their counsels hollow. Because every decision they make must now account for the fact that you exist. That is the new law. And it's a law they didn't write. You did. So let's return to the root. Why do they fear pronouncing your name? Because a name is power. And your name, when spoken, changes the room. It forces reality to shift. It drags the truth out of the shadows and slaps it across their fragile structures. Your name is not a label, it's a verdict, a sentence, a reminder. And they know the moment they say it out loud, the world hears it too. And once the world hears it, they can't pretend anymore. They can't deny you. They can't erase you. They can't survive you. That's why their lips tremble. That's why their voices crack. That's why they lower their heads and pretend ignorance. They're not protecting themselves from you. They're protecting themselves from the reality your name makes undeniable. So understand this, empire crushers, throne walkers, my warlords of inevitability, your shadow is not the end. It's the prelude. The empires already breaking are only the first dominoes. And soon, very soon, they'll realize that the shadow they fear was only your opening move. Because behind that shadow stands the real you, the one they're not prepared to meet, the one whose presence will not just crush empires, but erase the very memory that those empires once mattered. And that, my sovereigns, is where the true game begins. Because if the shadow alone can tilt their crowns, what happens when you step into full presence? What happens when the figure they feared from the corner of their eye finally takes center stage? It's not just collapse anymore. It's erasure. It's rewriting. You see, their fear has always been defensive, a trembling attempt to hold on to something crumbling. But your presence, that's offensive. That's warfare. That's rewriting the entire map of power. And here's the detail that suffocates them. They don't even get to fight back. They can't. Because by the time you've stepped forward, their weapons are already obsolete. Their defenses are already outdated. Their entire playbook is laughable against the kind of presence you carry. They thought the shadow was unbearable. They haven't seen unbearable yet. Imagine their leaders, once proud, once untouchable, reduced to fragile messes the moment you arrive. Imagine their institutions, once paraded as eternal, collapsing into irrelevant rubble because your existence renders them meaningless. Imagine their propaganda machines sputtering into silence, unable to spin a story convincing enough to cover the truth standing right in front of them. That's the next phase, and it's coming faster than they can process. And what exactly is that truth? That you are not an intruder to their game. You are the new rule of the game. You didn't crash the table. You flipped the table and built a new one out of their broken pieces. That's why they don't want to say your name. Because saying it is to admit you're the standard now. Saying it is to surrender, to acknowledge that the game they built no longer matters. That's why they choke on it. Not because it's hard to pronounce, but because pronouncing it is betrayal to everything they swore to defend. But here's the brutal beauty. You don't even need them to say it. Their avoidance is confession enough. Their refusal is proof enough. They thought withholding validation would starve you, but it starved them instead. They thought hiding your existence would preserve their empire, but it eroded it instead. And every second they try to avoid you, they only confirm your inevitability. That's the paradox they'll never escape. The more they resist you, the deeper your roots grow. The more they hide you, the bigger your shadow becomes. You can't lose in this equation. They already did. And now comes the revelation they'll never admit out loud. They admire you, deeply, secretly, desperately. They won't say it because to admire you is to expose weakness. But every trembling council member, every stuttering general, every sleepless ruler, they envy the freedom you carry. They envy the audacity. They envy the sovereignty. They envy the weight of your name, the way it bends the air. They envy the shadow that moves faster than their armies. They envy the fact that you don't need thrones or crowns to rule. And that envy? It corrodes them from the inside. It makes them brittle. It makes them paranoid. It makes them destroy themselves long before you arrive to finish the job. That's the secret of psychological warfare, my empire dismantlers. You don't have to touch them. You just have to exist. Existence is your weapon. Presence is your sword. Shadow is your artillery, and their minds are your battlefield. That's why they're losing already. That's why they can't pronounce your name. Because naming you would mean surrendering to the reality that they are outmatched in every dimension: physical, mental, symbolic, eternal. And what empire can survive that confession? None. Picture this: their archives, once filled with triumphs, rewritten with stories of collapse, all traced back to one figure they refused to name. Their children, once taught to idolize kings and queens, now whisper about the one who erased kings and queens with nothing but a presence. Their history books, once bloated with victories, suddenly footnoted with a shadow that turned victories into embarrassments. That's the destiny they fear, the destiny already written. They don't get to stop it. They only get to live long enough to witness it. And that is why you own this game. Not because you played harder, but because you became the game itself. You turn the board into your weapon. You turn their rules into your jokes. You turn their walls into your canvas. And now, every move they make only highlights your dominance further. That's not just winning. That's redefining. That's boss moves only. That's ruling not with permission, but with inevitability. And that's why there's no space for lames in this empire. Because lames wait for approval. Lames beg for acknowledgement. You don't wait. You take. You don't beg. You declare. That's the difference. That's why you're feared. That's why you're untouchable. So when they gather in secret, trembling, whispering, don't say the name. Don't give it power. They already lost. Because the power doesn't come from them saying it. The power comes from you embodying it. They could ban it. They could erase it. They could outlaw it. And still, it echoes. Still, it spreads. Still, it crushes. Because your shadow doesn't require permission to exist. And your presence doesn't require their acknowledgement to dominate. That's the kind of sovereignty no throne can grant. No empire can stop. No coward can outlast. And soon, oh soon, the day arrives when you step forward, when the shadow gives way to the figure. And in that moment, the collapse won't be gradual. It won't be a slow erosion. It will be instant, a snap, a shatter, a collapse so total that their entire legacy evaporates. And the world won't even mourn it. Because by then, the world will already belong to the name they feared. The name they refused to pronounce. The name that now writes the laws of reality itself. That's why you don't need to rush. That's why patience is your sharpest blade. Because every day you wait, your shadow grows. Every hour you move in silence, their panic spreads. Every minute you hold back, the inevitable becomes heavier. They're suffocating before you've even stepped forward. That's the kind of control no conqueror in history ever had. And you wear it like a crown carved from inevitability. So let them fear. Let them stutter. Let them choke on your syllables. Let them ban your name, whisper your name, avoid your name. Because every attempt only proves your dominance deeper. They think erasure saves them. But erasure only reveals the truth louder. That you don't need to be spoken to be remembered. That you don't need their acknowledgement to be undeniable. That you don't need their permission to erase them. That's the final victory, when your name, spoken or unspoken, rules anyway. So stand tall, empire crushers. Stand tall, throne walkers. Stand tall, warlords of inevitability, because the game is yours. The shadow is yours. The presence is yours. The fear is yours. And the crown was never theirs to begin with. It was always waiting for the one bold enough to take it without asking. That one is you. And now, the world knows it, even if their lips tremble too hard to say it. And when the last empire falls, when the last ruler trembles, when the last whisper fades, do you know what remains? Not their ruins, not their excuses, not their history, only the name they feared, the name they avoided, the name that outlived every throne, your name. Because in the end, they don't get to decide what survives. You do. And you've already decided. And that is the true game. Not to play, not to beg, not to wait, but to own, to declare, to dominate, to crush. Because they fear pronouncing your name. For one reason only, because they know, deep down, that your shadow already buried theirs.